going to be working on our commuter rail corridor study. These are the existing freight line corridors through the metro. And we're just fortunately set up the way they're laid out to really have a foundation for a commuter rail system. This is the B&SF line from Edmond and Norman, the old Frisco line that runs from Tulsa all the way down toward Lawton, which goes by the airport, and the UP line that runs out from Yukon and connects over through Del City and Midwest City, and there's a spur that's owned by the state that actually goes within a half a mile of Tinker. And so those are existing lines, and here's everybody talks about the Northeast line or the Adventure line. That's this piece here that's currently owned by Copta. And so, we're kind of fortunate. A lot of cities don't really have the layout just sitting there like that, and we do have a good layout for that type of system. Some of the trains on commuter rail, and this term is a technical term. When people say commuter rail, that term has become a technical term for this type of a vehicle. And I kind of don't like it because it tends to give the impression that you're only serving people that live way out and just commuters, which isn't necessarily true, because these trains are efficient and have a lot of ability to start and stop quickly, and you have plenty of stops throughout the metro, and they can almost serve the same capacity as light rail trains do nowadays. They're modern locomotives. The company that's making all these for most of these systems is an Idaho-based company called Motive Power. They meet EPA Tier 2 air quality standards. They're extremely quiet, and they're an impressive modern transportation engine. A couple of slides I want to show you on ridership and a couple of these systems. This is the Salt Lake City Frontrunner. 1.6 million riders in 2011, served Salt Lake City and up to Ogden and south to Provo. The New Mexico Rail Runner, Albuquerque to Santa Fe and south down to Los Lunas and Belen. 2011 ridership, 1.2 million people. The Minneapolis North Star is a new system. I kind of like this slide because their hub is right down by Target Field, and I don't know, there's just something about that that almost looks like you could see the train parked at Santa Fe would come to Brooktown, and there's something about that that gives you that kind of feeling. They say that their trains will, and I think all rail transit's this way, during peak traffic periods, these things will handle 1.5 lanes worth of traffic volume that you're pulling off your interstate. And this is estimated to generate $4.5 billion in economic development. So you've got to have a hub to connect these up. Here's some of the hubs that are going on across the country. Denver's redevelopment at Union Station, the new hub in Minneapolis. If you like the real futuristic stuff, that's Anaheim's new hub. And essentially, these are just your central link for your entire transit system. Your light rail, your commuter rail, your bus. And they're also really good at enhancing economic development in the core. A couple of quotes on the Denver effort to redo that whole Union Station area. They estimate that their redevelopment is going to create 10,000 jobs throughout the metro. And I like this a lot. It's going to cause many businesses to move to Denver because companies know their employees will not have to sit in traffic. They'll be home for dinner and home life. That's a lot about the quality of life aspect of this. Modern streetcars, which is what's taking place here in Oklahoma City. Under the MAX 3. Some of the ones that are actually under construction right now, Atlanta's constructing, Tucson's constructing, Dallas is constructing, and Cincinnati, I think, is also in the process of constructing. And these are all different vehicles from different manufacturers, but from our perspective on regional transit, the streetcar serves a function not only to serve local transit downtown. This is also what the transit planners call the last mile component. If you ride in on your transit system to the hub, people then want to step off of that onto a streetcar to get to work, to get to the hospital, to get where they're going. And so streetcar serves a really critical purpose for your regional system because it gets your rail transit riders to their final destination in most places where they can walk to that. And so the way that streetcar system gets laid out in conjunction with your rail transit plan is real important. This happens to be Cincinnati's plans for light rail, commuter rail, and how they're integrating where they want their streetcar to go. And again, you know, everything's connecting through their main intermodal transit center. So how do we make this all work? Well, you know, you need a public and political commitment, and I think we're all kind of working that way. You need to establish a regional transit authority, and then a regional transit district and dedicated funding to pay for it, which is kind of one of the reasons we're here to discuss some of those topics. And then once you do that, you build your system. We took our first steps with the 2005 Fixed Guideway Study, which recommended 3 commuter rail corridors, Edmond, Norman, Midwest City, Tinker. And then in the last years, we've taken some pretty big steps. $120 million for the streetcar under MAPS 3, $10 million for the intermodal hub. We've completed the intermodal hub study through ACOG that recommended the acquisition of Santa Fe Station to be the hub. And now we're doing our commuter rail corridor study. And then at the same time, we're going to start discussing some of the ways in which we might put that system together and govern and operate it. You're familiar, I'm sure, with that streetcar. They're currently in the process of deciding where the final decision on the route and how that's going to serve downtown and how it can be expandable. And again, from our perspective and from my perspective on the bigger system, here's Santa Fe Station. Part of what that system needs to do is look at serving also how you get those future riders on the bigger system to where they want to go. We had the hub study that ACOG conducted with Jacobs. We looked at all these sites throughout downtown. Again, we just have this fortunate layout of the existing lines that are sitting here, and with the line on the north side of Bricktown that allows us just almost perfect circulation of trains in and out of these different places and different municipalities we'd like them to go right through Santa Fe. Here's a potential rendering of what it could look like, a new transit hall, upgrades to the elevated terminal. And then you saw this slide at our last meeting. In the end, you've got to figure out how you're going to govern it and how you're going to pay for it. And I think that's probably the hardest part. So that's what we're here to discuss. This was the work from the Governance Finance Committee of RTD1 that looked at overlays of using precincts as an idea for developing that district that overlaid with your employment density and population density. And then in the end, you've got to figure out when you're going to do it. And I threw this together a while back just as a hypothetical, just to give everybody something to think about. And I started by saying, let's say that you wanted to have one of these systems in operation a decade from now. Start there. That's a long time, How are you going to get there if you want it operating in a decade? We've done the Fixed Guideway Study. We've got the streetcar system going. We've done our hub study. We're about right here. And we're starting our dialogue. And really, there's a lot to consider and to figure out how you're going to get those pieces in place and when you're going to do it if you want to get to a point down the road. And this may even be rushing it. So I just throw this up there to give everybody an idea to think about, because it's probably the best way to kind of put that in perspective is to look at when you want to be there and break it down on how you're going to reach that point. And then I'm going to leave you with one slide. This is kind of fun. I just threw this in here. All these different municipalities like to theme out their cars, and I think it's good to have a vision. And I didn't coin this phrase. I'm not really going to say where it came from, but Central Oklahoma Metropolitan Transit, you got Dart and Dallas, which kind of gives you a good idea. And I don't know, I think I kind of like to comment. They move pretty fast. So I'm going to leave it there.
All the class in high school graduates like.
There you go. So I'm going to leave it there. If there's any questions, I kind of went through it fast. It's on your printouts. You can look at that later. And
can you go back to the 10-year hypothetical timeline and kind of take us through that? Just
I will not in any way claim to be a transit planner. So Doug knows I'm not. But essentially, the two primary things you're going to have to do if you work backwards is, if you wanted this operational, before then, you're going to have go to the voters and get an RTD approved a district, and get a dedicated funding source, and you're probably gonna need to do that, I don't know, 5-6 years to start collecting revenue, to start building your system and commuter rail. So I just kind of moved this thing back, you know, about 5 years. And then before you do that, you're gonna have to create an RTA. And you're gonna need to have that RTA have plenty of time to get the people on staff and to come up with a plan and a way in which you're gonna go sell to the public and go about that. So I kind of threw that back several years. And that's, you know, these are a little more kind of just hypothetical. Once you get your funding, you know, you can, you got the dedicated funding source, you can start bonding or doing what you need to get your money in. You can start expanding your bus system and building your hub and starting commuter rail construction. And, you know, that would be definitely something a technical expert would have to tell you on when you would do that. But I think these three, you know, these are the two things that we all as a group, I think, really need to think hard about is how do we create this, and then when do you kind of look at doing it? And it's certainly complicated, and there's a lot, I think, involved, and some of us had discussions about that, so.
Okay. Questions for Marion? Yes, Tom?
Marion, any progress on CNG engines?
I think that there's been some discussion, I know at the streetcar level in the AA, about whether you could use CNG to run it. You know, the big thing is you need torque to drive a train, a commuter. You know, all the trains and freight trains are diesel electric. A diesel engine turns a generator to generate electricity, because electricity in an electric motor generates torque. And those things are so heavy, to accelerate, you need a lot of torque. That's why they're electric. So if you set a CNG engine, whether it was on a streetcar or on a commuter rail train, all you're doing is putting a big tank of gas there to run a engine to drive a motor, to generate electricity to drive an electric motor. So I don't know, I mean, in my opinion, I'm not an engineer. To me, it doesn't make as much sense, because in the end, you still have to have an electric motor, and you're only just using the CNG to do that. But on a commuter train, I think you'd be talking about having a boxcar size propane tank. And I don't know from the safety standards at grade crossings how people would look at that. So that's my only thought on CNG. But I think it's possible. You know, I know they've looked at it out in California really hard and ended up coming back to those Motive Express engines just because the standards for emissions were so good that that's the way they went. All right, thank you. No, okay.
Other questions for Marion before we sit down? Marion, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great overview.
Well, I have a question.
Cliff Hudson, the CEO of Sonic, has joined us just a couple minutes later.
Thank you. So this is an interesting hypothetical timeline. Have you done something corresponding in terms of, I made a note here, but you talk about governing and finance, and then also, you know, just what the program piece would be, elements, timeline, et cetera. Do you have anything similar for the breakdown of what those processes might be? Or, I mean, this is great work. I'm not trying to, I think this is great. Somebody to go the next step, somebody to take that to another level.
No, and that's why I'm going to let everybody here figure that one
Yeah,
out.
that's good.
It's actually a pretty good segue to our next agenda, because we will be talking about that.
Glad I could be home.